Ready to ring in the new semester? Pink's got A-plus styles for heading back to campus. Made for early morning classes, midday coffee runs, and late-night study sessions. Their latest looks are everything you need to pass with flying colors. We're talking tanks that go with literally every fit, parachute pants with a throwback 90s vibe, plus cute sweaters, activewear, and so much more. Shop now at pink.com or get 15% off in Pink stores with a valid student ID. Exclusions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Ollie. Back to school means food changes. Early breakfasts, school lunches, after-school snacks, and let's not even talk about dinner. Ollie's here to help you cover all the wellness bases. From daily multivitamins to belly-balancing probiotics, Ollie's got your fam covered. Buy 3 and get 1 free with code BUNDLE24 at OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. You can follow the Red Treehouse on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, Threads, and Facebook at Red Treehouse Pod. And now you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 per month and receive exclusive member benefits, including personal shoutouts, early access to episodes, bonus episodes, and more. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. As always, if you have a scary story or topic you'd like me to feature on an upcoming episode, email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. Important note, sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. Content warning. This episode includes graphic descriptions of violence and murder. Listener discretion is advised. When we think of scary stories that keep us up at night, what often comes to mind are supernatural or paranormal phenomena. Ghosts, possessions, hauntings, and things that go bump in the night. And while these are in fact scary, I'm convinced the scariest monsters don't live in our closet or hide under our bed. Instead, they walk among us, go to school and work with us, and may even be our friends. And underneath these very normal situations and relationships, sometimes lies an evil lying in wait, ready to strike in destructive, even deadly ways. Without a doubt, the scariest monsters are human monsters. When we think about human monsters, an age-old question often comes up. Are they born or created? Some believe certain individuals are born with a predisposition to violence and destruction. Others believe certain individuals are created by a unique combination of factors, and when given an opportunity, wreak havoc and chaos in the world around them. Still others believe both can be held in tension. There are some individuals born with an inclination to violence, and some individuals who are nurtured towards that end. In September 2006, 2 young men committed an unthinkable and tragic act of deadly cruelty towards a classmate and friend. Brian Lee Draper and Torey Michael Adamcik, both 16 years old at the time, murdered 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart and claimed to have been inspired by the horror film Scream, which led to them being nicknamed the Scream Killers. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the terrifying murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart at the hands of her classmates. Were Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik motivated to commit murder by an internal desire, or were they truly inspired by a slasher flick? I'll share the story. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse.
There should be no law against killing people. I know it's a wrong thing, but hell, you restrict somebody from it, they're gonna want it more.
We found our victim, and sad as it may be, she's our friend. But you know what? We all have to make sacrifices. Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddart. She's going to be alone in a big, dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get? I mean, like, holy shit, dude.
I'm horny just thinking about it.
Hell yeah.
What you just heard are the voices of Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik, two teenage boys who at first appear to be rambling about nonsense. The first 10 seconds of audio are surprising, as they wax not so eloquently about murder needing to be legalized and wanting to grasp a forbidden fruit, an indulgence or pleasure, in this case murder, that is considered illegal or immoral. But after those 10 seconds, the audio takes a shocking and dangerous turn when they call out the name of a classmate, Cassie Stoddart, who they claim must make a sacrifice with her life. The boys were juniors at Pocatello High School in Pocatello, Idaho. They were self-avowed horror movie enthusiasts and claimed to have been influenced by the horror film Scream. They were also fascinated with serial killers, and especially Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the two boys who committed mass murder at Columbine High School in 1999. Draper and Adamcik had similar aspirations, and it was discovered they started a death list of other potential victims. And equally disturbing was the boys' desire to, quote, make history by becoming notorious serial killers, end quote. Aspiring filmmakers, the boys often video recorded conversations about committing murder. Here is an excerpt of the transcript of one of their videos. The transcript alternates between Torey Adamcik and Brian Draper. Torey, you're evil. Laughs. Brian, yes I am. So are you, dude. Evil. Evil. No. Evil is an expression of God. That was another test you failed. Evil is not an expression of God. Yes, it is. That is bullshit and you know it. Evil of origin is a follower of fucking Satan. There is no Satan. Is Satan real? Then shut up. Then how are we supposed to express ourselves? Good and bad. We're bad. We are bad. That sounds so shitty. We're evil. That sounds even shittier. Hey, we're not, okay? Then we are sick psychopaths who get their pleasure off killing other people. That sounds good, baby. We're gonna go down in history. We're gonna be just like Scream, except real-life terms. That sounds good, baby. We're gonna be murderers. Like, let's see, Ted Bundy. Like the Hillside Strangler. No, the Zodiac Killer. Those people were amateurs compared to what we're going to be. We're going to be more of higher sources of Ed Gein. Laughter. Well, let's say we're that sick and that twisted. Murder is power. Murder is freedom. Goodbye. Cassie Jo Stoddart was also a junior at Pocatello High School, and by all accounts was a mature and responsible young woman with a bright future ahead of her. She was a hard worker who made straight A's in school, and at the time of her death had been saving money to buy a car. She was described as, quote, a friendly girl who was on good terms with just about everybody, end quote. An Associated Press interview with Cassie's brother, Andrew Stoddart, highlighted Cassie's love for art and music. Quote, she was really artistic. Our mom actually has some of her drawings hung up on the wall. She had all of her favorite artists hanging up in her room too. End quote. On the evening of September 22, 2006, 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart was house-sitting for relatives. She'd been tasked with taking care of the house and the family pets, 3 cats and 2 dogs, while her aunt, uncle, and cousin were away. At the time, Cassie was dating a classmate, Matt Beckham, and she'd gotten permission for him to stay with her at the house for a few hours. Unbeknownst to Cassie, Matt invited Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik over to the house. An important note, Matt Beckham did not have anything to do with Cassie's murder. It was a tragic coincidence that he'd invited Draper and Adamcik over that night. The boys stayed at the house for a few hours and watched part of a movie with Cassie and Matt. But after a short time, they left the home and claimed they were going to the local movie theater. Before this, though, they were given a tour of the home, including the basement. To this point, apart from the boys showing up at the home uninvited, at least by Cassie, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The boys stayed for a bit, left, and Cassie and Matt continued watching the movie for a bit longer. What they didn't know was Brian Draper, under the ruse of going to the bathroom, had snuck down to the basement, where he quietly unlocked the door before leaving. The intention was that he and Adamcik would sneak in later that night. After leaving the home, the boys recorded a chilling video detailing the setup.
I was 9:50, September 22nd, 2006. We know there's lots of doors. There's lots of places to hide. I locked the back doors. It's all locked. Now we just gotta wait.
Let's pause for a moment to consider what's going on here. Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik have set their plan in motion. They've moved from a sick hypothetical about murdering Cassie and others to taking the first steps to seeing this through. The entirety of this has been premeditated, and they've now crossed the line from idea to action. A short time later, the boys returned to the neighborhood and parked their car down the street from the house. Before this, though, they loaded up with dark clothing, gloves, and masks. The masks were particularly scary, painted white with red around the eyes and mouth. painted as though the eyes and mouth were dripping blood. Then, they walked calmly and quietly back to the house where Cassie and Matt were watching a movie and snuck in through the unlocked basement door. Soon after, Draper and Adamcik began making loud noises to try and lure Cassie and Matt to the basement. Their plan was to kill Cassie, but if Matt interfered, he too would meet the same fate. Despite the loud noises, the plan didn't work. Matt and Cassie didn't go downstairs. Realizing this, Draper and Adamcik found the circuit breaker and cut off all power in the house. After the incident, Matt Beckham recalled the two dogs standing, barking, and growling at the top of the basement stairs. The couple was unnerved and scared, and Matt called his mother to ask permission to spend the night with Cassie at the house, a noble attempt to calm her nerves. Matt's mother said no, but offered for Cassie to come to their house and spend the night instead. Cassie refused because she felt responsible for the family pets and assured Matt she would be fine after he left. At approximately 10:30 p.m., Matt's mother picked him up, leaving Cassie alone at the house. What happened next was the stuff of the worst nightmares. While on his way home from being with Cassie, Matt called Torey Adamcik's cell phone to find out where he and Brian Draper had gone, as he was hoping to meet up with them at some point that night. He noted he had trouble hearing Adamcik on the phone, as he was speaking in a low, hushed tone. Remember, both boys left the house the first time and claimed they were going to a movie. Matt assumed Torey was speaking quietly because they were in a movie theater, and had no idea they were not only not watching a movie, but were in fact still in the house, preparing to kill Cassie. After hearing Matt Beckham leave the home, and realizing Cassie was alone, Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik cut the power off to the home once again, still hoping she would come down to investigate. She didn't. So the boys decided to go upstairs. Brian Draper was armed with a dagger, and Torey Adamcik was armed with a hunting knife. Cassie, firmly settled on the couch, heard Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik stomp up the stairs. The power was still out, and the house was pitch black. Hoping to scare Cassie, Draper opened and slammed a closet door. Then, they attacked. Both boys rushed a startled Cassie, and in a matter of seconds, stabbed her 29 times in the neck, chest, arms, and torso. Then, they walked out of the home and left Cassie to bleed to death. After getting in their car, they recorded another video.
I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke.
I'm shaking.
I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed Cassie. Oh, fuck. That felt like fucking real. I mean, it went by so fast.
Shut the fuck up. We gotta get our act straight.
Okay.
The next day, while hanging out with Torey Adamcik, Matt Beckham attempted to call Cassie several times. He got no answer, and he had no idea what had happened the night before, and that the person he was with was responsible. On September 24th, 2006, nearly 2 days after the murder, Cassie's aunt, uncle, and cousin returned home from their short vacation. Cassie's 13-year-old cousin walked in the front door and discovered Cassie on the living room floor. Authorities were called and quickly responded to the scene, where they found, quote, Stoddart's body covered in blood and riddled with deep lacerations and stab wounds, end quote. Investigators quickly closed in on Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik, and both boys were brought in for questioning. Adamcik went first, and he told investigators that they'd arrived at the house for a party, but left when it was obvious there was no party. He told investigators a version of what he told Cassie and Matt before leaving that Friday night. They were going to see a movie at a local movie theater and would crash at his house after the movie was done. Investigators noticed something interesting. Torey Adamcik could not recall anything specific about the movie they'd seen just 2 days before. Not the start time, not the actor or actress in the movie, not even the name of the movie. Brian Draper was interrogated next, and he quickly admitted to being in the home at the time of the stabbing, but claimed Torey Adamcik killed Cassie and that he did not participate at all. He claimed he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sensing investigators were not fooled, Draper eventually admitted to stabbing Cassie, but that he only did so under direct orders from Torey Adamcik. Draper eventually led authorities to the Black Rock Canyon area, nearly 25 minutes from the home, where he unearthed evidence the boys had buried after the murder, including 2 dagger-style knives, a black-handled knife with smooth blade, a folding knife, a red and white mask, latex gloves, and the video recordings detailing their desire to kill people and their specific plan to kill Cassie. On September 27, 2006, just 5 days after the murder, Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Evidence presented by prosecutors was damning. The recordings were played for jurors and transcripts read aloud. Dr. Stephen Skumal, a pathologist, described the wounds inflicted upon Cassie Jo Stoddart. Quote, "In my opinion, vital structures were injured, and it did have the potential to be fatal. The cause of death was stab wounds to the trunk." End quote. In all, 13 stab wounds were considered fatal, with almost all of the fatal wounds puncturing the right ventricle of Cassie's heart. On April 17, 2007, Brian Draper was convicted on both counts. On June 8, 2007, Torey Adamcik was also convicted on both counts. Both received a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and an additional 30 years to life for conspiracy to commit murder. They're currently serving their sentences at Idaho State Correctional Institution. Cassie Jo Stoddart was laid to rest in Mountain View Cemetery in Pocatello, Idaho. The shocking and gruesome nature of the crime brought to the forefront a common question. What motivated Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik to murder their classmate and supposed friend? More specifically, were their murderous actions brought on by an outside influence, or nurture, or genetic predispositions, nature? Both boys claim to be fascinated and influenced by other serial killers, mass murderers, and horror movies. but is fascination alone indicative of murderous intent? Some experts believe home environment is a significant factor in an individual's development. And for some, the theory goes that if you grow up in a loving, nurturing home, then you're likely to be loving and nurturing as well. In some ways, this makes logical sense, but fails to account for environmental factors outside the home: friends, co-workers, predominant culture, and more. It is a reality that many children do not grow up in a loving, nurturing home. Yet, they are deeply empathetic people who exhibit love, compassion, and care for others. One article stated, quote, "While humans are genetically predisposed to engage in aggressive behaviors to survive, other forms of aggression are not natural human qualities. Psychologists maintain that violence is an acquired, learned behavior, a cultural phenomenon." End quote. Other experts believe biology and genetics reveal potential violent tendencies. We know genetics are a factor in other ailments and illnesses. But does this mean every violent person is genetically predisposed towards this? Are human beings innately violent? Perhaps the most helpful approach is balanced, holding nature and nurture in equal tension, and recognizing each as contributing to the whole. According to the CDC, there are several individual factors which increase the possibility of violent behavior, and the list includes biological and environmental factors. 1. High levels of emotional stress or problems. 2. Having been victimized by violence. 3. Exposure to violent and other types of family conflict. 4. Drug, alcohol, or tobacco use. 5. Learning disabilities, ADHD, and hyperactivity. 6. Social cognitive or information processing issues. And 7. Antisocial tendencies. The list includes several family and community risk factors that may contribute to teen violence. However, quote, "They don't always offer a complete explanation. Some teens will act violently in the absence of these risk factors, while others will buck the trend and keep themselves clear of violent behavior, even in an environment where several risk factors are present." End quote. In the case of Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik, it's likely biological and environmental factors contributed to their murderous behavior. A predisposition towards violence may have been exacerbated by media coverage or portrayal of serial killers and the Columbine shooters. And horror movies like Scream may have influenced them to act out their darkest, most awful fantasies. No matter the cause, what Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik did to Cassie Jo Stoddart was evil and tragic. A beautiful life cut short by two real human monsters. I'll admit, I refuse to use the nickname given by the media to Draper and Adamcik. Though they claim to be influenced by horror movies and serial killers, the truth is, to me at least, both boys use these as an excuse and scapegoat, a way to say it's not our fault. The movies made us do it. The premeditation in the lead up to the murder and on the night of the murder lead me to believe both Draper and Adamcik knew exactly what they were doing and committed cold-blooded murder against an innocent classmate. I first heard of this case in 2013 after watching the documentary Lost for Life. The film includes interviews with Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik, and I was stunned sitting there. Their responses to the crime they committed could not have been more opposite. Draper appeared contrite and humble, and took responsibility for his actions. He knew what he did was wrong and evil, and he acknowledged that it was just for him to be sitting in a prison cell for the rest of his life. Torey Adamcik, on the other hand, was unwilling to accept responsibility. And what's worse, based on the documentary, his parents also refused to hold him accountable. Instead, they placed the blame solely on Brian Draper and were hoping to have his conviction overturned upon appeal. You'll be glad to know that both Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik have filed various appeals over the years. Both have had their appeals denied, and their convictions and sentences upheld. As we close this episode of The Red Treehouse, we're left with this lingering question. Is there a way to identify a person's predisposition for violence before they commit murder? And how can we prevent something like this from ever happening again? I've shared the story. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.